This is the story of how I was so close to making my first lumber sale. I was so excited that someone contacted me and asked me to mill some wood for them. They heard that I had a sawmill and they needed a board to fix their arbor in their backyard. Yes, you heard me right. They just needed one board. They said they needed a 2x6 by about 13 feet. He wasn't so sure on the exact measurements for the length. I said I could mill him a beautiful piece of cedar to fix his problem. I said I could mill a 2x6 by 14, just in case he needed it to be a little longer than 13 feet. He said that sounded great. I told him I would charge him $20 for the board. I felt like that was a good deal. I then said I could deliver it for $10 extra, and he agreed. He said he didn't need it for a couple days, so I could take my time. I was so excited that I had my first person who just wanted to buy wood and not an actual project I had to build, that I cut the tree down the very next day. You heard me right. This was the first piece of wood that I have sold from my mill. I also have never advertised that I sell wood. I only sell little projects that I make. The other wood I mill is just for me and projects around my property. I have milled wood in exchange for labor before. I cut some wood for my buddy and he brought his tractor over to help me move bigger logs, and that's how we settled up. Anyways, I was so excited to cut this board for this guy. I'm not really sure why, because I knew I was not going to make any money from it if I included the amount of time it was going to take me to find a tree that I could get a 2x6 by 14 board from, cut the tree, limb the tree, move the log, bring the log to my mill the log, and then strap the board down and deliver the piece of wood. That sounds like a lot of work for $30. But I said to myself that you have to start somewhere, and this sale might lead to a bigger sale down the road, and he may even give you a good reference, so I took the job on. I found the perfect cedar tree for this job. It was a dying cedar tree with only a little green at the top of the branches. I was concerned about cutting it down though, because there was a nest in the top of the tree. It looked like an old nest, so I threw some rocks at it to see if anything moved or chirped. This may not have been the best idea, but it was the only idea I could think of except for climbing the tree, and I did not want to do that. The nest seemed empty, so I cut the tree down. Thankfully, it was empty, and it definitely was an old nest that hadn't been used for a while, so that made me feel better. The tree was in a pretty exposed location on my property. It was next to the main road that leads in and out, so I knew I was going to have to limb it and move the branches before I could actually mill the tree. It didn't take long, but it was an extra step that I had to do. Once that was accomplished, I measured a 14-foot, 6-inch log from the tree. I just knew this was going to be long enough since we agreed on a 14-foot board, even though he said he probably only needed a 13-foot board. I went ahead and cut the log 6 inches longer just in case. Once the log was cut, I had to move it. I used my truck and trailer and winched it on. I was pretty impressed with my trailer backing up skills and got it right in front of the log with no problem. Once the log was winched on, I took it to the mill. The way I take my logs off the trailer is just by tying them to a tree and pulling them off by driving away. Sometimes with the longer logs, I have to reattach them to my truck and pull them forwards or backwards depending on their relation to the log bunks. The first step to any milling job is to make sure that your saw head is ready to mill. I just make sure that my blade is tensioned properly and that the blade is tracking on the wheels properly, and then I'm ready to mill. Oh, also, another important part is that your blade is staying cooled throughout the milling process, so this is what I'm doing here. Rolled the log down the log bunks to my mill. It was a little out of line, so with some pulling and creative rolling, I was able to line it up with the mill. I then winched it on with my hand winch, and it was ready to mill. Milling a log this long on a 16-foot mill can be kind of awkward. Sometimes it's like too far on the end, so you have to find a creative way to bring it forward so it won't be hanging so far off the end that the mill won't reach the butt end of the log. So this is what I'm doing here. The milling part of this project was actually super simple. All I did was cut the four sides off, made it into a cant, made sure the cant was 6 inches wide, cut that into a 2-inch thick board, and then the project was pretty much complete. All I had to do was tell the guy I was ready to deliver his board. I messaged the guy that night saying that I have the board ready and I needed his address to deliver in the morning. He was quick to respond, but not with the message I was wanting. He said he never got exact measurements of what he needed, and he would be right back. I was nervous to say the least. Did I just waste all that time and effort? The news wasn't great. He messaged me and said he needed a 16-foot, 1-inch board, which is significantly longer than the 14-foot, 6-inch board that I just milled. You see, when we settled on a 14-foot board, I didn't think anything about him not having exact measurements, because he said he probably only needed a 13-foot board. It seemed like whenever I suggested milling a 14-foot board, that would definitely work for his project. I even said he could cut the 14-foot board down if he needed it to be shorter, and he agreed. This was where I learned my lesson. I have never dealt with anyone when it comes to selling lumber, so I didn't know you should never mill the wood until you get exact measurements. You may be thinking, duh, you idiot, but you live and you learn, I guess. I told him my mistake, and he said it was his fault for misleading me. But I said it was my fault for not double-checking and getting exact measurements before I milled the board. He asked me if I could mill the 16-foot, 1-inch board. I said that I wouldn't be able to. You see, I already didn't want to go through all this work for $30, but I thought it might be good for me later down the road. I also already had the tree in mind that I was going to mill for this project, and I already cut it down and cut it to a dimension that I can no longer get the board he needs from it. I did not want to go through all that work again for $30, so I told him I couldn't do it. I said, please keep me in mind for future projects. He said he would, and asked where he could buy a 2x6 by 16 foot board from. I said he can buy a pressure treated 2x6 by 16 board for about $15 at Lowe's. He said thanks, and we both went our separate ways. And that's how I was so close to making my first lumber sale. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something or found this video entertaining. Like and subscribe for more.